Cyborg Assassin 1, Chapter 19. Frankie kicked a rock across the arid ground as he and his terrorist friend took Ollie off for a run outside the compound. Dave had made him visit the nurse and she had dressed his eye with clean bandages and ointment. The covering didn't stop the wind whistling past his ears, sending chills through his chest and spine. The sparry cat bounced around Dave, begging for him to throw something to fetch. The man glanced at him and snorted. "Now we're out of hearing shot, you tell me why you returned and what the fuck happened to your face." Frankie tensed. He'd never heard him drop the F-bomb. He must have been really cross. "I didn't like it there. A girl threw her boiling tea in my face." "Why?" "'Cause I was wearing a communist uniform and they killed her parents." "And taken her brother," he thought. Dave grimaced. "You Caesar eater?" "Yeah." "Do you like her? Was she nice?" "I liked her, and she liked me. She was kind." "Why'd you come back?" His friend's voice sounded strained. "I missed you and Olio. The girl who burned me wasn't a friend of Zarita's. That happened later." A lump formed in his throat. He mustn't tell him about Zing. "Well, you're a twit. They want me to teach you as an assassin now." "I'm ready." Dave's head recoiled. Eyes widening, he stopped instead. "You're ready to kill?" "You told me yourself. If we don't do it, someone else will. Those captives are gonna die. So what's the difference?" "You're a fool, lad. It'll eat you up from the inside." He drew in a slow, steady breath. "Like it does to you?" "Aye." The lonely man looked at his shoes. They started walking again. Frankie squatted to pick up a stick, then straightened. He threw it as far as possible. Olio ran to fetch it. "If it eats you up inside, then why'd you do it? You should have joined Zarita. You didn't have to stay with the rest." "I'm claustrophobic. I can't live in those caves." "Have you ever been in them?" "No, and I don't want to." Hidden City's wonderful. There are all kinds of levels of forests and farms. The air is as fresh as out here. I live on the tropical level. "Then why'd you come back?" "I told you. I missed you guys." "That's no excuse to become a killer." He popped his knuckles. "You have no pardon either." "It shocked Zarita that you'd become a terrorist. She thought you'd run away instead because you were a kind child." Frankie's lips pressed tight into a grimace. Dave was partly good, but killing innocents made him bad. "Well, I ain't proper." Dave scratched a zit on his cheek. "And they want me to train you." "I'm prepared." Dave accepted the soggy stick from the prancing sparry cat and threw it twice the distance Frankie had. After the three of them returned to base, Dave gave Olio water and they sat beside the radiator to warm. Dave had been stocking up on different cookies and pastries and soon had the treats piled on a plate and a pot of tea on the brew. The sparry cat lapped up his water and then stretched his bearded muzzle across his rug and fell asleep, snoring. He was out for the count and didn't wake when Frankie scratched the rubbery spikes around his mane. Dave shrugged as he eyed the last biscuit. "Go ahead." The terrorist dunked it into his tea and devoured the whole thing in one bite. He drained his drink and stood. "I'm taking a shower before supper, lad." When Dave locked the restroom door, Frankie started to his feet and opened the tin of keys on Dave's dresser. He detached the one with the yellow sticker. This was his chance. He bashed on the bathroom door. "What is it?" "I'll meet you in the cafeteria." "Wait 10 minutes." "Why don't you?" "I'm starving." "It's too early. The meal won't be fixed yet." "Want to see if Dennis is there?" "More than likely. He's always the first to arrive." "Do you mind if I go now? I'll find you a spot at the table too." "Do what you must." He slipped out the room and walked in the opposite direction of the canteen. When he passed other people, he made himself look like a man on a mission. He took a sharp turn to the right and stopped at the firearms closet. A militant rounded the intersection. Frankie dropped to a squat, pretending to do up his shoelaces. When the man had gone, he pushed the key into the lock, turned and entered, clicking the door shut behind. It was dark. He couldn't see the firearms to distinguish which to take. He should have brought the headlight which was hanging on the hook under Dave's trench coat. His belly knotted. Getting out would be even harder than entering. Heartbeat pounding his eardrums, he pressed his temple against the door. Silence. But would he hear the soft pads of footsteps? He took his chance. The hinges squeaked and Frankie stepped into an empty passageway. He ran to the modest suite where he entered. When he entered, Dave was already out of the bathroom and fully dressed. He was drying his white chin-length hair with a small towel. "What you doing here?" Dennis wasn't there. I felt foolish sitting alone. "Was the food ready?" He swallowed. "Not yet." Dave let out a bark of laughter. "Told you. Surprised you're hungry, though. Ate enough of those biscuits with your tea." He pasted on a smile. His muscles twitched under his skin as he wondered how he'd return the key, but Dave pushed him into the corridor. "Come on, lad." While Dave was finishing his meal, Frankie swung his legs over the bench. "I need a dump." "Yuck." "Oh, sorry." "Yuck!" Dennis's little sister wrinkled her nose. Dave roared with glee. "Go on, lad." Frankie headed towards the main exit. "You're going the wrong way." "I'd prefer to use R1. "I don't know what's with him today," Dave shouted as he left. This time, when he reached their premises, he found the headlamp, pocketed it, and dashed to the weapons cupboard. A guard was flirting with a young woman leaning against the wall. Frankie's features downturned and his pulse slowed until they walked away and around the corner. He entered without being seen. Activating the flashlight, he scanned the rows of hanging weapons along with their labels. SA-80, SA-80. That was the weapon Bernie wanted. It was enormous. He'd never be strong enough to shoot from that thing on his hover. He'd never hide it under his jacket. Shit. He searched for the short-range gun which Bernie recommended. Why hadn't the stupid guy told him how huge the sniper would be? Glock 17, Glock 17. He spotted an open box of them and picked up one of the small guns. He gulped and slipped it inside his inner pocket. After returning to the apartment without issue, he smiled at the sleeping Olio, then put the key on the key ring with the rest of the bunch and dropped them in the tin. Before hanging Dave's head torch under his coat, he hid the pistol under his mattress. He wouldn't be capable of shooting the guards in the keep towers without that sniper, even if it was almost the length of his legs. He needed help, but Dave mustn't know the truth. When Frankie and Dave returned to their apartment after breakfast the next day, Dave said, "Get washed." "Are we taking Olio for a walk?" "Nope. Apparently I ought to teach you how to use a gun." "So soon?" Dave shrugged. "Well, you came back. You seem you can look someone in the eye and kill 'em, so that ain't my fault." Even the healthy skin on Frankie's face burned. "Come on, wash." "I'll brush my teeth. Don't need to wash." "Do what you must, but hurry. I'll get the gun." "What piece are we using?" "You'll see." Dave returned carrying a large rectangular case. He crouched on the floor and opened it. The gun inside looked like the SA-80s he'd been fretting about in the weapon closet. It didn't look so big laying on the bottom. He shut his gaping mouth. "How can you carry that?" "Don't worry. You won't need it for jobs at the labour camp." "Why?" "Because the guard will give you a machine gun like he did me." "One like that?" Dave smirked. "Nah, lad, this ain't no machine gun. This is a sniper for long-distance shooting. You should be fine with the use of only one eye. Only need one to aim." That was the precise gun he'd needed to kill the prison guards. Bernie had said so. And the sniper had a case so he'd carry it on his back while he flew. Then he'd crouch behind a bush and shoot from there. "What's it called?" "It's an SA-80. They're the only sniper guns we have." "Why are you getting me to practice on that?" "I'm not. It's too hard. This is for me. You can learn on the SA-80 when you progress." He looked around as if someone might be watching, then took out the sniper, placed it on the ground, and peeled back the foam. "You'll be learning on this." The gun hidden underneath looked different, yet still bulky. "What's that?" "A self-aiming rifle. Warmth spread through his body, but he hid his smile beneath his palm. Has someone been listening to his wishes? Do they know I'll be using that? Yep. Isn't it a beauty? Frankie flinched. Guns weren't beautiful to him. I guess so. Why make me train on the easier one? Because we don't have enough time. Enough time for what? Dave's Adam apple bobbed up and down. Because we're gonna need 'em for monitoring Mount Alamazi. Are we hunting? Yeah, for Beluvians. Huh? Dave pressed a fat finger against his lips before pointing at Frankie. Surveillance witnessed a white Beluvian and someone else up there a few days ago. He stared at Dave's face, not seeing. Who? What? Dave pointed at him again and nodded. A drone spotted 'em. It didn't get footage on where they came from, though. You'll need that self-aiming rifle while we watch and wait in a tree or something. Look here, he jabbed a finger at the barrel on the end. That's a silencer, so we can kill without warning the others. You'll practice shooting this now, and if you do well, I'll let you use the sniper every other day until you get good too. How about watching Mount Alamazi? We can target train up there tomorrow or this afternoon, should you shoot well with the rifle. Won't we be going into the labour camp? No, not for ages. The drone which spotted a white Beluvian couldn't see the second person's face because he or she was wearing a hood. Frankie's shoulders relaxed. That's a shame. Dave strapped the large gun case on his back and tied a sack filled with food and other stuff to his hoverboard. As they levitated over the scrubland, Frankie reflected on how his fold-up hover turned, speeded up and slowed down much more quickly. He eyed the case on Dave's back. When the time came, he'd be carrying that sniper case alone. Hopefully, he'd get to take the rifle instead. Could he shoot from it one-handed while levitating? Not likely. Through his unblinded eye, he glared at the black and red arid land, mottled with yellow and orange. He clenched his jaw, wishing he'd never gone to see Isa. How could he ever rescue his stepbrother alone? Her stepbrother alone. When they landed, Dave told him to stay where he was and levitated 20 meters away to set up the targets to shoot. After he returned, he typed a passcode into the rifle's interface, 8642. This gun is really pricey. We only have one of them. I've just unlocked its advanced aiming system. Step by step, Dave showed Frankie what to do. The 18-year-old finally pulled the trigger at the man-shaped target's head. He recoiled from the blast. Bang! Frankie's pulse pounded in his throat and nausea churned in his stomach. His limbs trembled. You got it! Well done, lad! Dave patted his upper back. Now try the target to the right. In the skull, again and again. But each blow shot their pretend brains all over the place and left Frankie a quivering mess. Sorry, that bit needs editing out. I'd say we can go up to the mountains now. You can try the sniper tomorrow. That won't be so easy. When they reached the top, the snow had already melted. Frankie gazed at a beautiful pyramid made of purple crystal. He shivered. The thought of killing made him nervous. Even a guard in a tower might be a father, brother, and son. Are we bugged? Bugged? Can anyone hear us? Dave put a heavy hand on his shoulder. No, lad. Then why did you put your finger against your lips and point at me when you talked about the drone spotting a white Beluvian? I know it was you and Zarita. How? I saw the footage. I recognised her. They don't all look the same once you've met one. Are we really going to kill a Beluvian if we see one? No, but we can pretend we're trying. I want no more of them drones coming up here again. But you'll kill prisoners of war, including children? I have to. Do you like it? Dave's face reddened. Of course I don't. What is this? I have to learn, don't I? It's up to you whether you like or dislike it. I'm just fighting for the cause. What cause? A world where everyone's equal and there ain't no slums. A world where no one gets to learn anything. What shite are you speaking now, lad? You were about to learn computer engineering. What about history and the other worlds of Plan 8? Why'd you want to learn about anywhere else? This is your home. Zarita said she'll teach me. Then why'd you come back? I never wanted you to return. You're screwing away your life with a gun. There's a reason I returned. What? His breath hitched. An increased sense of desperation took hold of him as time ticked onwards with the situation unresolved. I want to rescue someone who rescued me before, he thought. I told you before to see Olliot and you. Dave let out an old man's sigh. Frankie flinched as Dave took hold of his stiff hands and blew them warm. I should have brought you gloves, lad. Here, take mine. He snatched a pair out from his coat pocket and put them on Frankie's hands. The numbness soon melted away. When are you going to the concentration camp again? Why on earth you keep asking me that? I want to go there again. It's bloody awful there. Why'd you want to go kill people? There's a boy I want to rescue. He saved my life. So that's why you came back? Frankie nodded, staring at the crystal pyramid. It gleamed like violet water under the red sun and sky. I thought there was more to it than that. Will you help? Course I bleeding won't. Did you forget who I am? I know you don't like what you do. I've been doing it too bloody long to turn away from it now. Did she put you up to this? Who? Zarita, of course. No, I nearly died on the way to Hidden City. I almost fell down a crater, but that boy Zing, he grabbed my hands and pulled me out. Zing? The Boluvian kid outside the cave? He nodded. He was on his way to rescue his sister from the labour camp we'd just left. After he prevented my death and let me into Hidden City, he made his way there. And he got caught? He nodded. But he rescued his sister and her friend, and they made it back without him. Now tell me who the hell burnt your face? Zing's sister. He gaped. She saw my communist uniform, thought I was a baddie. Bitch. Why'd you want to help a bitch like that? Because her brother saved my life, he snorted. Like I already told you. Well, I ain't helping. I didn't think you would. Wish I'd never told you now. And you ain't helping either. Keep your nose out of it. Chapter 20. That night. While Frankie lay in bed in the dark, fear clenched around Frankie's chest like a tight fist. When he heard Dave's gentle snore, he rolled out and slipped on his thermals, clothes, belt and gun holster. Olliot jumped to his feet, panting and yelping for attention. His heart thrashed double time, and he patted the sparry cat until he purred and rubbed against his legs. Frankie continued to stroke him as he reached under his mattress for the Glock 17 while picking out leather gloves from a box under his bed. He straightened and inserted the Glock into a holster, then stuffed the gloves into a pocket in his trench coat, which he pulled on. Olliot's purrs turned to excited pants, and he padded his front paws beside the door. Frankie wrapped his black coal around his neck and reached for Dave's light-intensifying goggles from a hook. As he eyed the door, he dropped the goggles into his coat pocket, then squatted to pat Olliot. Dave was such a heavy sleeper that he'd never worried about waking him when running this scenario through his head, but he never considered his pet. Now the sparry cat was making loud yelps and licking his face. Desperate, Frankie stroked the feather down his spine while his eyes flitted towards the desk and spotted a carton of meat biscuits beside the tin and headlamp. He tiptoed over and opened the box, then poured all the biscuits into Olliot's bowl. The sparry cat munched noisily, smacking his lips together and crunching. But Dave didn't budge as his snores got louder. With luck, when Dave finally awoke to see the empty box of biscuits and an empty bed, Frankie would be back at Hidden City with Zing. He lifted the key out of the tin and put the headlamp in his pocket. There was little point stretching it around his head until he reached the weapons cupboard, in case someone in the passageway saw him. After patting his groin to make sure the foldable hoverboard still rested in his underpants pocket, he slipped out the door. Although he walked as quietly as possible, no one was around. Only a few infrared glow balls dotted the corridor. The cupboard of weapons opened and Frankie sneaked inside, closing the door behind him. There were several cases containing different guns, but he'd memorized the pattern of scratches on Dave's and quickly found it. He opened the latch and picked out the sniper, then placed it on the empty shelf. After peeling back the foam, the tension left him. Accessing the digital control panel and keying in the password activated the self-aiming rifle's advanced targeting system. Frankie double-checked the trigger was locked and tied the case onto his back under his trench coat. His coat felt too tight over the case, which gave him a hunched appearance, so he took the case off and tied it to the side of his waist. Although uncomfortable, he concluded if any guards saw him here, they'd be less likely to see it under the flaps of his coat. The next steps might be hard, getting above ground. They kept the hatch locked and alarmed at night, but he had heard of another way out. Some teenagers had discussed how a teenage girl had once sneaked into the canteen, then climbed out of the bathroom window. She did it to smoke a crafty joint. They said the guards had smelled it from the security gate, but when they caught the girl, they asked her to share it with them. After that, she'd watch movies with them in the security hut. He wouldn't be smoking anything, so, with luck, they wouldn't smell him like they had her. From the food hall, he entered the bathroom. It stank of disinfectant. After clambering on the toilet, he reached for the window and unlocked it. So much for top security. Once outside, he unfolded his hoverboard and pulled his hood over his white hair. Then he stretched his goggles over his eye patch and healthy eye. The burnt flesh ached, dully at first, then in hot stabs. Dogs barked, their paws dashed against the grit. Without a second thought, he ascended so quickly the spotlights wouldn't catch him. Although he spotted no one under the light of two thin crescents, he remained as high as possible, trembling in the freezing air. There was little in the way of cover around the perimeter of the concentration camp. If Frankie had to shoot the guards in each corner tower, he'd do it in the shadow of a prisoner's block. Taking his chance, he hovered over the base and looked down. To get the gun out of the case and shoot, removing the trunk from his hip was essential. He'd drop quickly, hoping to keep out of the red floodlights. The display screen between his handlebars showed he levitated at 2,000 feet. He'd drift to 1,000 first and position himself before programming the hoverboard to descend at free fall vertically. His belly fluttered as tears welled in his eyes. They stung his partially blind eye under eye patch and goggles. Thinking about his face reminded him to cover it with the black coal. His Mayleedian white skin was too reflective against red light or white. He descended 1,000 feet slowly. On the mostly windless night, he should find himself in a suitable position. While covering the display with his gloved hand, he peeped as he programmed it. The hoverboard should vertically fall and then decelerate 2 feet below the roof of a dormitory. As he held his breath, he pressed the go button and fell. It felt like his stomach pressed into his lungs as he clasped the handlebars and closed his eyes. When it decelerated, he had to tighten his leg muscles to prevent himself from falling. When he opened his healthy eye, he noticed his estimations were correct. As he sat in complete darkness, he waited for his pulse to slow, breathing to steady. Am I really doing this? He felt like peeing himself. He was so scared. To prevent alerting anyone, he'd have to shoot the guards in all 4 towers and speedily. He saw 2 guards from where he sat, one to his right and one to his left. After he untied the case from his torso, he lifted the gun out. Then he folded his hoverboard and returned it to his underpants pocket. Holding his shoulders tight, he padded over the gravel towards the floodlight and watched from the darkness. Buildings up ahead blocked his view of both watchtowers. He'd better plan his attack before shooting. Just because his rifle had a silencer didn't mean the others wouldn't discover the attack. He had to shoot the watchtower guards as quickly as possible. Kill? Really? Coldness hit his core. He was about to sneak back, but the door of the building from where he stood squeaked open. A guard strolled past, then stopped to light a cigarette. Muscles tight, he unlocked the trigger and aimed at his head. The man fell like a rock. Without looking at the towers, he crawled towards the corpse and dragged it with all his might into the gloom. The body was heavy for such a short man, yet he mustered his strength and pulled him into the shrubs behind the building. He compared their guns and kept the self-aiming rifle. Something brushed against Frankie's hand. A rat. He almost screamed and waved it away, but it didn't budge. It licked the blood pouring out of the man's head. More rats came. Almost crying, Frankie pulled off the man's boots and pants. He changed into his clothes, all except the skull cap, which was soaked in blood along part of the rim. He put his goggles, coal and gloves into his new pockets in the army waistcoat, noticing a large key within an inside pocket as he did so. His rifle wouldn't fit in a pocket, so he carried it instead. He hesitated. Would the other guards be suspicious if he didn't wear a cap? Teary-eyed, he wiped the patch of bloodied hat onto his abandoned pants and pulled it over its head. Now he looked like a jailer with an eye patch. He could kill 2 men in the watchtowers and be one of them if the alarms blared. He aimed and shot the left tower guard, then 2 seconds later killed the other. Heart racing, he walked casually into the floodlights, then crossed into the darkness on the other side. He stared at the other towers before pulling the trigger twice and killing both guards within seconds. He cracked his knuckles as he thought about his options, then decided to seek Xing. As he walked back into red brightness between the buildings, 4 floodlights cast his shadow short and fat around his feet. Perhaps he shouldn't have shot the tower guards at all. It was bad to kill. If they'd just thought he was another warden, what was the point? His eyebrows gathered in as he wondered where other watchers were. Faint music drifted from a building. He advanced towards it and stared through a dirty window. He could barely see through the smoke inside, but noted women and men infantry, drinking, playing games and dancing slowly in pairs. No wonder it was so quiet out here. He looked heavenwards and let out a huge breath. Now was the time to look for Xing. He quickened his pace as he scanned through the windows on his right. Finally, he saw a hospital ward. 10 patients lay in beds. Bandages wrapped around their limbs and heads. Bruises covered their swollen faces. Although there were many Renidians among the albino-skinned Minidians, Xing was the only Beluvian there. His enormous eyes glistened under the infrared glow ball, which levitated against the ceiling. Frankie tried the door, locked. He pulled out the key. The padlock clicked and he sneaked into the room. Eyeballs seemed to sag out or bulge with fright as the patients noticed him. Faces twitched and expressions soured. Their fear was palpable and reeked thickly in the air. These were torture victims, not patients. Xing flinched and muttered something foreign when he stopped beside the black alien's bed and dropped into a squat. He reached into his pocket for his translator, but realized he'd forgotten it. Shit! He motioned for them to leave instead of talking. Xing gritted his teeth and pointed his chin towards his mangled legs. From somewhere deep within, Frankie wanted to leave him there and escape before he got found out, but he'd promised Isa. She'd never forgive him if he didn't try, and he wasn't one who could lie to someone's face. Xing covered his mouth and nose with a hand, then nodded. Frankie struggled to help him out of bed. He wrapped Xing's arms around his shoulders, but the Beluvian's legs buckled. Frankie spotted a crutch beside a neighbouring bed and seized it. Finley got out of his bed but took a slight step back when a small boy said in Vortanese that they were free. It must have been a trick. Perhaps the guards would murder them all once they walked away, shoot them in the backs. Oh, sorry, I just realised there that this scene needs to go after the next scene. Sorry, so I'm just going to highlight that. Okay, I'll come back to that after my next scene. Let me scroll down. Okay, sorry, that scene about Finley, the chief in command, Cyborg, from Oshun's spaceship. I'll pop his scene into the next chapter, the last chapter, chapter 21 of Cyborg Assassin 1, which you can find in my next video. Thanks.